Welcome to the Charts podcast. Our title today is Software, the Next Frontier in Energy. And we are thrilled to have Alice Goodman, Head of Marketing Communications at Kaluza, to join us to talk about this. Alice was named one of our rising stars in energy last year, with a colleague stating, as a company where 90+% of the staff are involved in tech and product development. Alice has been able to establish the importance of marketing and brand to the extent that everyone across the business understands the value and is engaged. And that's a tough thing to do in tech. Today, she will share her views and expertise on how software is the next frontier in energy and how this is shaping communication strategies. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you, Fred. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. As one of the first Kaluza employee, can you tell me more about the business and the journey you're on?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a nutshell, Kaluza is an advanced software platform empowering energy companies to take every customer on the journey to affordable green energy. So why do we exist? I'll explore this a little bit. So as your listeners are likely very aware, energy remains one of the biggest contributors to climate change. And although we're reaching encouraging milestones, by the day, just this week in the UK, we actually had the closure of the UK's last coal plant. There's a long way to go still in managing, storing, and actually sharing that renewable power in an effective way across millions of homes. So we know that customers actually have a critical role to play in this future system. They can essentially become the change agents of the transition if they have the right green technologies in their home and they're allowing energy to be optimized to the greenest and cheapest times. But currently, in most markets, they're lacking the information, the tools and incentives to go on this journey. And for many, electric vehicles and solar panels, etc., are simply too expensive. So we believe that this is where companies, energy companies, retailers, suppliers need to transform to become trusted advisors for their customers. The problem that they have is that actually they've been running on technology that's been in place for 20 years plus and simply hasn't been built for the system that we have today and we will in the future. So, we just think about the kind of digitization that's happened on the system. A few years ago, it would be a household would probably send off about 2 meter reads a year, and now it's over, it's tens of thousands essentially. So this huge amount of data is, kind of feared, and it brings a lot of complexity, but at the same time, a huge amount of actually opportunity for energy companies to be ingesting it, understanding it, and using it to kind of power the products and the services that will make a real difference to customers and the planet. So that's why we're here. We're here as a software platform that's going to help energy companies to automate their processes, such as billing, so they can actually focus more time and investment on the innovation and the exciting stuff that's going to get people to a zero carbon future. And it's been a whirlwind of an experience so far. We've expanded internationally now, so we're working obviously in the UK with OVO, but also in Australia with OVO. We've just signed a licensing agreement with AGL, which is one of the largest Australian energy businesses. And we also work in the US with the likes of PG&E, in Japan with Mitsubishi as well. So it's really taken off, and it's an exciting journey to be on.
Yeah, for sure, an exciting journey. And there was a lot in your answer that one can pick up on in terms of people using old software, reluctance to change, and all of these are hindering, of course, the energy transition. So it's a lot about changing the way people think. It's a big part, both for tech and for communication, etc. But you addressed this. But what would you say makes Kaluza different to some of the other technology disruptors out there? Because for the layperson, it's hard to understand the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, our client or partner is the energy business. Obviously, they are serving millions of customers. So I think for us, we see ourselves as a B2B2C, she says, with floating speech marks. I think, it's really having that deep understanding of the end customer and what a great experience looks like for them, and then being able to work really collaboratively with energy companies in order to deliver that. And I think that's quite a key difference with Kaluza is we understand that brand equity is a really treasured thing of energy companies, and actually we kind of very much believe it's up to them to decide, how they want to evolve for the future, their future business models. And that's why we have technology that's really, really flexible, so that they can, almost do it on their own term, but with our, powerful technology, and the teams who are just, really, really friendly and really creative in how we can solve these problems. I think we're also self-declared energy nerds is probably the best way to put it. I think you can see a lot of other players in the market looking across multiple different verticals, whereas we just think there is such a lot of work to be done ultimately in energy alone, and that's where we're really focusing, our attention. We believe every customer should have the opportunity to have affordable green energy, and I think when you start to look at, customers on a small island with a really unique kind of metering setup, those that are able to have the electric vehicles, the solar panels, the batteries, there's a whole array of different customer archetypes that energy companies need to be there for. So I think that's something that makes us quite distinctive as well.
No, I agree. Conquering a niche is, well, a big niche as that, energy, which is always expanding, is important. Having the expertise to help one sector is really, really important. We believe in that at Charles. That's why we host, of course, our event, which is very neat. All right, very good. So in terms of your technological changes and the changes in the market, what changes have you seen over the past 5 years, and where are you anticipating future changes?
Yes, it's quite extraordinary, even in the last 5 years, to see the changes on the system, particularly when you look at the volatility of energy markets on a global level. I mean, obviously, with COVID and geopolitical factors in recent years, we've seen the cost of energy really go up. But at the same time, and because of renewable energy and this cheap renewable power flooding the system, we've also got a lot more periods of negative pricing. And in fact, in Australia, who are a very advanced market, they have in 2018, I think it was, they had about 20 hours or so negative price periods within a year. And now that's well above 1,000. So if you think about those, swinging prices, it's no wonder that, since 2021, in places like the UK, 30 energy companies have gone under, and they can no longer survive these really challenging economic environments. We're seeing it play out slightly differently in places like the US, where there's so many blackouts occurring in different markets. So I think it really points to the fact that energy retailers and utilities need to transform in order to not just survive, but actually thrive in this new energy reality.
Interesting. But if you are specific for energy retailers, what does this mean for energy retailers today?
Yeah, so I think, there's a certain urgency now, and I would say in the last year we've been approached by a number of different businesses who are really realizing that kind of now is the time to act, and actually there is in fact maybe greater risk in not acting rather than acting. So we've got this opportunity to capture the attention of customers now and focus on building this trust and loyalty for energy companies to keep them for many years to come. I think there was some really interesting data that our CEO presented in a conference a couple of weeks ago about how there's a trend that we're seeing in terms of consumers and the energy transition, where they start off really excited and engaged and wanting to make a difference, and they kind of soon dip into, I think it was Ernst & Young who did this, into the valley of disillusionment, they call it. And when they kind of start to realize how difficult it is to make these changes, and it's countries like, I think, Sweden, who are starting to come out of the other side and actually thanks, I think, to the focus of Sweden on kind of community energy projects and the kind of new jobs and the lower energy that's associated with that, are actually starting to kind of reach more of a normal or come back up again. So I think we're going to see these really interesting kind of trends with customer engagement. And I think an area of real success that I think we're going to see at greater scale now is this intersection between energy and the auto world. If you think about these two historically very separate sectors, energy companies are wanting to transform for all of the reasons that we've talked about, and auto companies actually, in the shift to electric vehicles, are really trying to seek new revenue streams to ensure that they, are sustainable going into the future. I was personally quite surprised to find out just how much revenue and profit was driven by after sales and things like fuel, etc. So what's actually great to see is this kind of mutually beneficial kind of new tariffs and products and services around electric vehicle charging. In the UK, we're powering a tariff called Charge Anytime, an add-on, where customers get 2p. They can charge up on 2p per kilowatt hour. Sorry, 7p per kilowatt hour. They drive for 2p a mile, which is saving them about £400 a year. And they just don't have to think about it. They know that they can plug their car in at any time, and because you've got Kaluza optimizing in the background, they know that their car is going to be charged at the cheapest, the greenest time. They've got a flat rate that's not going to change. And collectively, we've actually saved customers over £11 million now. So I think there's examples here of innovation that is actually working for not just the energy company, but also for auto companies and millions of customers in the future. So I think, it's really exciting. There's a lot of kind of scariness about what's to come, but I think we're seeing a lot of really exciting success early on as well.
Interesting. No, yes, it's going to be exciting times ahead, like they've been for the past years. But you mentioned that you started in the UK, but you're not only operating in the UK, in Australia and America and elsewhere, Japan and elsewhere. But now that you're working in those several markets around the world, what are some of the interesting points of difference and similarities between those markets? And how is this shaping your marketing and comms strategy?
Great question. It's really eye-opening, actually, when you get under the skin of these different markets and how they operate and have done for a very long time. I think we can see real similarity across kind of themes such as digitization and decentralization. Lots of these markets are pushing towards net zero and decarbonization. So this is all happening, in a similar vein. I think some markets are a bit further ahead of the curve in some respects, at least. So Australia, as we've talked about, really fascinating. Approximately 1 in 3 households actually have solar panels, which is world leading. And while obviously this is a very good thing, there are actually times when there is so much solar on the system being exported to the grid is actually really contributing to this volatility that we've talked about. So from a comms and marketing standpoint, a lot of our narrative and storytelling has been around how energy companies can manage and navigate this volatility and actually respond really quickly to some of the changes that they're seeing. I think a great example of this is some of the work that we've done with OVO in Australia, actually, where in a matter of days, I think 20 days for 3 different tariffs, we're actually able to go out to customers who had electric vehicles and solar panels and offer them 3 free hours a day of energy, just because we were able to allow OVO to manage that volatility and optimize supply and demand. So yeah, it's that's been really exciting. Then meanwhile, you've got the US, which is highly regulated, lots of vertically integrated utilities, except from states like Texas. So there are real concerns there about keeping the lights on. So for comms and marketing, it's okay. Obviously, the message here, what people are really caring about is grid resilience and stability. So that takes up then more of the messaging for that market.
Interesting, thanks. Well, a little bit more on communication, maybe. So when I entered the energy space 9 years ago or something, I soon saw that there were so many acronyms being used. So people using their internal language, and they understood each other, I think, but they weren't understood, on the outside. So the industry is full of acronyms, and you are using a complex technology. We often use the phrase simplify to amplify. So say something really simply so people can hear you better. How do you navigate those complexities to effectively communicate with your audience?
Yeah, it's hard, right? I think lots of people listening can relate to this challenge. And I think as well, historically, before Kaluza, I worked for a B2B software as a service business in the cybersecurity space. So another, B2B tech company, and, to take B2B tech into energy just seems like the most complex space you could probably work in. I'm sure there are a few others, but I think so. So, these challenges of how do you make things, as you say, understandable to people? How do you make it engaging and sexy? Like, how do you make billing sexy? It's a real challenge, but a really exciting and fun one, I think, for marketing and communications. I think as well, because software is obviously very abstract, you can't touch it, you can't feel it, so you have to be really creative in how you're bringing it to life. And I think a really effective way that we've definitely found and want to be doing plenty more of in the future is around showcasing the tangible benefit that it's delivering to people's lives. So yes, while there's obviously many challenges around language and eliminating these acronyms and jargons, which, by the way, do actually change from market to market. So even if you think you've got a handle on one market, when you're kind of on a global growth path, you soon realize there's plenty more learning to do. So going back to these comms first principles of being really crystal clear with what it is that you do and why it matters, and leaning on tools and channels such as visual storytelling, video, client testimonials to try and bring it to life in a way that's actually going to make people stop, think, and listen.
Interesting. Well, making billing sexy, that's a task that you mentioned. That's going to be an interesting one. Yeah, so I want to maybe follow more up on the marketing and branding part. So one of your superpowers is to establish the importance of marketing and branding across the business. And that's what you do well, Kaluza and you as a person. But how do you bring everyone with you?
Yeah, it's tough, especially because, a lot of people at our business, and I think this is true of a lot of product and technology-led businesses, are extremely passionate and mission driven. They really want to feel like what they're doing every day is making a difference, and they feel really connected to the kind of mission of the business. So I think really crystallizing that message is key, and drawing those links towards, okay, you might feel like you're kind of in the weeds of a billing platform, but actually what that is enabling an energy company to then focus on, because you're doing it, is so much bigger. So I think that's been a key challenge, and something that I think we've maybe done semi well at, but I'm sure there's a lot more we can do in trying to raise that visibility and understanding within the business. And I think we actually did this brand exercise maybe 1 or 2 years ago now, where we kind of went about and we interviewed stakeholders, both internal and external to the business, on what they thought Kaluza's value proposition is, and kind of the big questions. And I think, albeit at the time we were focused on, okay, what's the kind of visual look and feel of the future Kaluza going to be, we learned so much by just having these conversations, these rich insights on actually what people take the business to be. And I think people really appreciate, as much as possible, being brought into processes like that. It's difficult when you have maybe a lot of people at the organization, but there are ways, surveys, if not in-person interviews and things that you can actually get people's input on. So I think, yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but I think we're very fortunate that our senior team have actually a really good appreciation, I would say, for branding and marketing within the business and the role that it will play as we continue to kind of, go to market in these different regions globally.
No, fascinating. For me as a branding expert, it's the journey, the transformation journey always begins on the inside, not with some creative campaign. So it's just to get everyone along is so important to help them to understand what things are about and understanding our identity versus the image, how others see us. So I like your answers. So we are coming to the end of the podcast. So I want only one more question. So because we want to be positive and end on a positive note, can you do more to build a more positive picture of what's happening in the energy industry? Can we do more? Maybe not you.
Oh my gosh, what a burden. Yes, ultimately, yes. I mean, the answer has to be yes. And I think, the industry draws optimists and ambitious people because we really care. And we do think, there is light at the end of this, what can seem a long tunnel at times. So I think obviously there's a long way to go. It's pretty harrowing to watch the news nowadays. I'm kind of nervously turning it on in the evenings to see what's happened now. But I think, it's obvious that climate change is here and it's happening. It's having a real effect everywhere. But I think what we can be motivated by and inspired by is the innovation that we're seeing in the sector. And maybe I'm fanciful, but I actually do believe in a world where we can have happy customers, well-sustained, robust energy companies, and the grid all working pretty smoothly. So that's the kind of vision I think many of us at Kaluza have as well. If you look at some of the innovation that's happened just in the last few years, it's actually extraordinary. And I think maybe sometimes we're so immersed in the day-to-day, we don't take a step back to appreciate and realize how much progress has been made. For me, vehicle to grid is an example of such a technology which I just think could have mind-blowing impact on the future state of energy, to essentially turn your home into a mini green power station for the grid, whereby, your surplus green energy is being stored in, your car and then pumped out into the grid. And it can actually mean customers aren't paying their household energy bills. That's amazing. Can we imagine what that would do if that was in every home? So I think it's those kind of places of innovation and examples that actually I think make us kind of sit up and think, no, this is possible, and we have to keep on going to ensure that, as I said before, everyone is taken along this journey.
Those are some really good last words. I have nothing more to add. I'm just very grateful that you gave us your time to come and chat to us. I hope the podcast audience, the Charles podcast audience, they liked what they heard. And see you next time. Thanks a lot, Alice.
Thank you so much.